Welcome back to another video about metal roofing systems. In today's video, we'll be talking about trim and flashing. And today I'm joined by Technical Services Manager, Jeff Haddock. So Jeff, just quickly, what's the purpose of trims and flashing in a metal roofing system?
Trims and flashings are generally there to cover up all terminations and transitions in the metal roof panel. Any break in that metal roof panel, you're going to need to counter flash that, cover it, and prevent leakage into the system. We also utilize flashings for, like I said, when transitions and the roof shapes change, right? So we're breaking from one roof plane to another roof plane where it may necessitate a valley or a hip or some other type of flashing. Flashings are also designed for internal considerations as well when we're dealing with waterproofing means where you may not necessarily see the flashing behind the panel, and it's used as a water seepage prevention measure to prevent leakage into the roof system itself. But primarily, the flashings are used for terminations of panels, panel ends, transitions, and things of that nature.
So I know there's a lot of complexity with trims and flashing. There's so many to order from and different types. What are some of the key considerations when, speccing out or ordering a metal roofing job to take into account with trim and flashing?
This is one topic that is near and dear to my heart. So, as manufacturers, all of us, and I don't care whose website you go to, we all have generic detail installation guides, right? Some of those installation guides may have part numbers, they may have predetermined size of these flashings. And one big thing I talk to when I'm dealing with installers and designers is focus on the concept of the detail. Don't pay attention to things dimensionally that a manufacturer may have or may not have put on there. Now, there are some critical dimensions on certain flashings, but for the most part, if it's going to be in an exposed application, you really want to make sure that that flashing is going to be fit for purpose. And what I mean by that is that it's going to cover what you need it to cover. Now, I may have a trim on my website, let's say for a gable condition, and my trim may show that it's 4 inches tall, right? Well, what if your gable edge has an 8-inch exposed area that needs to be covered up? Ordering out of my catalog isn't going to do you any good because now your flashing is too small to utilize. So one of the big keys, like I said, is the concept of how the detail goes together, the parts and pieces. That's the main key point to pay attention to. Don't get hung up in sizes that are provided within some of these details. Sizes can be adjusted. Most manufacturers worth their salt have the ability to fabricate flashings in a custom nature, meaning we can take that piece of trim and we can fabricate it to whatever size it's needed to fit the site specific application. So, like I said, don't get hung up too critically on what the dimensions are that manufacturers are calling out because you really want to make sure you're doing field measurements and utilizing the concept of the detail, not what the manufacturer just says, oh, I'm going to order this out of a catalog. Never a good idea to order directly out of a catalog.
Yeah, right. So getting it custom to the project consideration. So outside of that, are there some other kind of common issues or problems that you see with trims and flashings when you're on a job site?
One big thing is making sure that obviously they're attached properly. You want to make sure that they're sealed properly. We do have a lot of sealing instructions for properly sealing at the overlaps, making sure that you have a proper overlap on the flashings. Generally, a good overlap at a flashing condition is 3 inch on center. We want to make sure, if it can be avoided, that we want to make sure flashing laps are facing away from prevailing winds or prevailing weather so that you don't have things blowing into lap conditions. Generally speaking, you want to make sure that you're following manufacturers' prescribed details on a lot of that, in which we have sealant call outs, fastener placement. The biggest thing is on center spacing and the specific type of fastener you should be using. So really, that's a key aspect to pay attention to. The flashing details, where I was saying that flashings can be modified and adjusted, but you really want to pay attention to what a manufacturer's recommendation is as far as sealant placement, the type of sealants that are used, and the fasteners that are going to be used as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so when we even get into custom colors or metallic colors, the risk associated with trim and flashing can get even higher, right? In terms of, ordering considerations, or if contractors stuff it up in the field and need to get new material. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So a big concern, and this is really referring back to metallic colors. Metallic paint systems are what we call as batch sensitive, meaning we paint our metallics with a mica finish in it or metallic flake within it. And generally, those are all painted within the same batch. And what we do on metallic jobs is we try to make sure all of the material, panels and flashings and things of that nature, are all coming out of that same coil, that same paint batch. Because if you start to take, let's say you started the job with one paint batch of metallic color, and then for whatever reason you damage some material or should need something replaced, if you end up having to pull material from a different paint batch, a metallic that was different, the metallic flake within that paint batch could be laying slightly different and will reflect differently. So you could actually get shading variances from one panel to the next, even though it's the same color. It's just how the pigments are reacting to that sunlight. So while with a metallic, yeah, you have the same color, technically speaking, but because of the way that the paint's applied, you could get a completely different color look or shading variance based off of the angle of the sun that is hitting it. And it can really take away from the overall look and aesthetic of a project.
So given that fact, did you have a bit of a rule of thumb of how much extra you should order, or, account for in
Yeah,
projects like that?
estimators are really good about this. Usually you want to make sure you're accounting for a 5 to 10% overage on material just to account for any unforeseen issues. That might get some pushback on that 10% being a little high. I know with waste being at the forefront of a lot of estimators and project managers' minds, you want to keep that waste at a minimum so that you're not throwing good prime product out and basically wasting good money that you've spent on it. But you also want to make sure that you've taken special care, especially when you're dealing with custom paints and metallic paint batches. You want to be sure that you're going to have enough material there for the what ifs. What if, you've got damage, things occur on these job sites all the time, and you want to make sure that you've got the proper amount of material there to, possibly account for these unknown situations or events.
And just on the topic of, reducing waste and scrap and things like that, are there any other tips that you have for contractors when handling trim and flashing to avoid, damage in the field, because they're a little bit more, fragile compared to panel systems and things like that?
Well, it just comes down to handling, really. I mean, you just got to handle it carefully. A lot of flashings don't have the structural rigidity that a panel does. And if you're just walking around flimsy flamsy doing it, and if you bent the panel, and once you put a crease in steel, you're not going to get that crease back out. So you just want to handle them carefully, and knowing that this is a finished product, right? This isn't drywall that you're going to cover up with a texture and then repaint over it, right? Or that you can patch and things like that. Metal is a finished good. It's going on. The owner is expecting a very aesthetically pleasing roof, chosen selected colors. You just want to make sure you're handling the flashings with care when you're applying them.
Oh, fantastic. All right. Thanks, Jeff.